Hey everyone, we're working hard to get our first 1,000 subscribers, sign up and you won't regret it. I didn't even want to go. That's the part that still makes me laugh in a bitter way, how hard I fought to skip a party that ended up detonating my life. Erin had been excited for weeks. Company holiday gala. Nice hotel downtown. Open bar. Everyone's going, she kept saying, like attendance was a law of physics. Erin wasn't the type to get swept up by corporate culture, but her office had gotten weird lately. Tense. Secretive. Like people were holding their breath. And her boss, Vince Caldwell, was the reason. Vince was the kind of man who looked like he'd been generated by an HR handbook, expensive haircut, permanent tan, teeth too white, handshake that squeezed a little too long. He ran Erin's division like a private kingdom. People either adored him or feared him. Erin tried to stay invisible around him. She'd been doing that more lately. We pulled up to the hotel valet, and Erin smoothed her dress in the car mirror. Navy blue. Simple. Elegant. She'd picked it because Vince had once told her, offhandedly, smiling, that red gets attention. I'm not trying to get attention, she'd muttered afterward, like she was apologizing to me for something she hadn't done. I remember that now like a warning I ignored. Inside, the ballroom was all warm lighting and clinking glasses. A step and repeat by the entrance with the company logo. A photographer. The kind of event where people pretend they're relaxed while silently calculating everyone else's rank. Erin spotted coworkers and got pulled into a circle. I hovered like the stray spouse I was, nodding, smiling, catching fragments of conversation about targets, budgets, and Q1 restructuring. Somewhere in the noise, I felt my phone buzz in my pocket. A message from my attorney. We're clear. Final signatures filed. Congratulations. That was it. No fireworks. No confetti. Just a text that meant I now owned the company Erin worked for. Not in some dramatic I walked in with a briefcase and bought it on the spot way. More like, months of negotiations, a purchase through a holding group, a quiet majority stake transfer that wasn't public yet. It was all still under non-disclosure until Monday's internal announcement. Even Erin didn't know. She couldn't. I'd signed papers that would ruin the deal if I spoke too soon. I slid my phone back into my pocket and forced myself to act normal. Erin deserved a normal night. And for the first hour, it almost was. We ate rubber chicken and listened to speeches that tried to sound inspiring while saying nothing. I watched Erin laugh at a joke from a colleague and felt a small, simple relief. Maybe we'd make it through. Maybe all the tension from her office would stay in her office. Then Vince arrived. He didn't enter like a person. He entered like a performance. He worked the room with his hands out, slapping shoulders, pulling people in close, speaking right into their faces like intimacy was a weapon. People lit up when he looked at them. Like they'd been picked. When Vince spotted Erin, his smile sharpened. He drifted over, already holding a drink. He didn't even glance at me at first. His attention locked on Erin as if I wasn't standing beside her. Erin, he said, like he was tasting the name. You look phenomenal. Erin's smile was polite but tight, the way you smile when you don't want to be rude but you also don't want to encourage anything. Thank you, she said. Vince finally turned his head toward me. I got a quick up and down scan. And you must be, he said, pausing. Caleb, I said, and offered my hand. He took it loosely, like a favor. Right, he said. Caleb. Good to meet you. Then he turned back to Erin. I don't know how to describe what it's like watching another man treat your wife like she's already his territory. Not flirting exactly. Something worse, ownership disguised as charm. Vince leaned in close to Erin's ear. Too close. Erin's eyes flicked toward me for half a second, a flash of discomfort, then she laughed softly at something he said. A defensive laugh. A please don't make this a scene laugh. I tried to step closer, to make my presence real again. Vince put a hand on Erin's lower back. Not a casual, excuse me, touch. A steady, familiar placement. My stomach dropped. Erin stiffened. Her shoulders went up like she'd braced against cold. I watched the moment where she considered stepping away, and didn't. Because we were surrounded by her coworkers. Because Vince was her boss. Because humiliation isn't always loud, sometimes it's the quiet decision to tolerate what you hate. Vince raised his glass. Everybody, he called out. A few people turned. Then more. The noise dimmed as attention shifted toward him, like a spotlight clicking on. Vince smiled wide, drunk on the room. I just want to say, he announced, this team is the reason we're still standing after this insane year. And Erin, he turned to her, and the room followed his gaze, Erin is the reason my division hasn't collapsed under pressure. Erin's face flushed. She looked trapped in her own skin. People clapped. A few hooped. Vince held up a hand like he was calming them down, savoring it. Then he stepped closer to Erin. And kissed her. Not a peck. Not a quick cheek kiss. A full, deliberate kiss, on the mouth, right in front of everyone. For a second, my brain refused to process it. Like the image didn't fit reality. Then I saw Erin's hands, frozen at her sides. Not on him. Not returning it. Not pushing him away. Just stuck. The room went silent in a way I've never heard before. A collective gasp swallowed into shock. Vince pulled back like he'd just done something adorable. Couldn't help myself, he said, grinning at the crowd. Some people laughed, too loudly. Others stared at the floor. A couple of Erin's coworkers looked at me like they were waiting to see if I'd explode. Erin finally moved. She took a half step back, her lips parted like she'd been slapped. She looked at me. Not pleading. Not guilty. Terrified. And in that moment, I understood something I hadn't wanted to understand for months. This wasn't a random drunken mistake. This was a public message. Vince wasn't kissing my wife because he was drunk. He was kissing my wife because he believed he could. I felt my hands clench, nails biting into my palms. My first impulse was to lunge forward. To do exactly what everyone was secretly hoping for, give them a scene to tell later. But I didn't. Because somewhere deep under the shock, another thought rose up, calm and cold. He has no idea what I did today. I leaned toward Erin and spoke quietly, so only she could hear. Go to the restroom, I said. Stay there. Her eyes widened. She nodded fast and turned, moving like she was trying not to run. Vince watched her go, then looked back at me with a smug, lazy smile. You good, Caleb? He asked, like we were buddies. I stared at him long enough to make the smile falter. Then I said, very calmly, yeah. Vince chuckled, relieved. Hey, he said, leaning in, lowering his voice like we were sharing a secret. No hard feelings. She's a star. She deserves appreciation. My vision narrowed. I could feel the room listening without pretending not to. I swallowed the rage, forced my face blank, and nodded once. Enjoy your night, I told him. Then I walked away before my hands did something my future couldn't undo. I found a quiet corner by the hallway, pulled out my phone, and opened Erin's messages, because yes, I knew her passcode. Not because I was controlling. Because we'd never had secrets like that. At least, I thought we hadn't. I scrolled quickly, heart pounding, looking for anything, that explained what I'd just seen. And then I found a thread with a name saved as VC. The last message wasn't from Erin. It was from Vince. If you tell your husband, I'll make sure you never work in this industry again. My breath caught. My thumb hovered. I opened the next message above it. And that's when I saw the photo Erin had sent. A picture of a hotel keycard. With a room number. And a timestamp from 2 weeks ago. My hand started shaking so hard I almost dropped the phone. Behind me, the ballroom erupted into laughter again, like nothing had happened. But my world had already cracked. Because now I wasn't just humiliated. I was looking at proof. And the next morning, Vince Caldwell was going to learn what it felt like to be powerless. Except I didn't realize yet that Erin wasn't the only one hiding something from me. Erin came out of the restroom 20 minutes later with blotchy eyes and lipstick scrubbed off so hard her mouth looked raw. She walked straight to me like she'd decided whatever happened next couldn't be avoided. We need to go, she said. I nodded and led her out without speaking. My voice didn't feel safe in my throat. In the car, Erin stared out the passenger window, hands clenched in her lap. I waited until we pulled onto the highway. Then I said, how long? Erin flinched like I'd slapped her. Caleb, how long has this been happening? My voice sounded too controlled, like it belonged to someone else. She swallowed. It's not. I glanced at her. I saw the messages. Her face went pale. There's a special kind of silence that happens when someone realizes the lie is over. Not just uncovered, dead. Erin's voice came out thin. It started when he changed my role. He said he'd fast-track me. He said he'd protect me during restructuring. Protect you from what? I asked. Erin laughed once, humorless. From being cut. I gripped the steering wheel harder. So he threatened your job. She nodded, eyes wet. At first it was comments. Then invites. Then, being alone with him stopped feeling optional. You went to a hotel, I said. Erin's eyes squeezed shut. I didn't sleep with him. I didn't answer right away. Not because I didn't believe her, because I didn't know what belief even meant anymore. You sent him a keycard, I said. I sent it because he demanded proof I was there, she whispered. He wanted control. He always wanted control. My jaw tightened. And the kiss tonight? Erin's voice broke. That was punishment. I looked at her sharply. She stared down at her hands. Yesterday I told him I was done playing along. I told him I was going to HR. Why didn't you tell me? I asked. Erin flinched again. Because I was ashamed. Because I thought I could handle it. Because he said he'd ruin me if I did. I thought about the way her hands had stayed at her sides during the kiss. The terror in her eyes when she looked at me. How frozen she'd been. My anger shifted, not gone, but redirected. Did he touch you without consent? I asked, carefully. Erin's breath hitched. Yes. The word landed like a weight in the car. My vision blurred for a second, rage rising so fast it was dizzying. We got home and Erin went straight to the bedroom, closing the door softly like she didn't deserve sound. I stood in the kitchen alone, staring at the dark window, replaying everything. Then I remembered my phone. The attorney message. The deal. The thing I hadn't told Erin. I'd bought the company because it was undervalued and bleeding money. Because its founder wanted out. Because I'd been building a small portfolio of businesses for years, quietly, steadily, while Erin thought I was consulting and doing investments. I hadn't lied exactly. I just hadn't explained. My ownership wasn't public yet. But it was real. Which meant Vince had kissed my wife in front of a room full of employees, and technically, he'd done it at my company. I sat at the kitchen table and opened my laptop. I pulled up the internal org chart I'd been given during due diligence. Names. Roles. Reporting lines. Vince Caldwell sat high, Senior Vice President, Operations. Erin's direct manager was 2 levels below him. HR reported to Vince's buddy, Gavin Pierce, Chief People Officer. My stomach turned. If Erin went to HR, it would go straight into Vince's circle. He'd bury it. Twist it. Punish her. And now I understood why the company felt tense. It wasn't just budgets. It was fear. I made a call. Not to my attorney. To my transition lead, an older woman named Marlene who'd been running compliance for decades and looked like she ate corporate predators for breakfast. She picked up on the second ring. Caleb. I need you to do something tonight, I said. There was a pause. That's not usually how we run a takeover weekend. I know, I said. This can't wait. I explained in clipped sentences. The kiss. The threats. The messages. Marlene went quiet for a long moment. Then she said, forward me everything. I can, I said. But Erin's phone. Not Erin, Marlene cut in. Your copies. We do this clean. I swallowed. What do? We don't do revenge, Marlene said. We do documentation, procedure, and consequences. That was almost comforting. Almost. I forwarded screenshots, times, dates. The threats. The keycard photo. Anything I could capture without physically taking Erin's phone. Marlene responded with a single line. Do not alert anyone at the company yet. Not even your interim CEO. I'll assemble an external investigator by morning. I stared at that message, then at the closed bedroom door. I wanted to kick it in and demand Erin tell me everything. I wanted to hug her and tell her I'd fix it. I wanted to drive to Vince's house and make him regret having hands. Instead, I sat there, shaking, trying to choose what kind of man I was going to be next. At 2:13 a.m., Erin came out in sweatpants, hair damp from a shower, eyes swollen. She stood in the doorway like she was expecting a verdict. Are you leaving me? She asked quietly. I looked at her for a long time. I don't know, I said honestly. But I know this isn't staying inside this house. Erin's face tightened. Caleb, if you go after him. If I go after him? My voice sharpened. Erin, he threatened you. He humiliated you. He'll destroy me, she whispered. He knows things. He has people. I pushed back from the table and stood. I need you to listen, I said. Erin hugged herself tighter. I bought the company, I said. Her eyes blinked, confused. What? I bought it, I repeated. Today. I signed the final papers tonight. I own a majority stake. It goes public Monday. Erin stared at me like she couldn't make the words fit. You're joking, she said. I'm not, I said. Her mouth opened, then closed. Her face shifted through disbelief, shock, and something like fear. You didn't tell me, she whispered. I couldn't, I said. Not yet. Erin's voice rose, cracking. So you're going to use that to, what? To punish him? I'm going to stop him, I said. And I'm going to protect you. Erin shook her head hard. You don't understand how he works. I stepped toward her. Then tell me. Erin's eyes filled again. And when she spoke next, her voice dropped to a whisper that made my stomach turn. He's not the only one, she said. I froze. What do you mean? Erin swallowed. There are others. Other women. And Vince didn't start it. My mouth went dry. Who did? I asked. Erin looked away like she couldn't bear to say it. Then she said a name I recognized immediately from the org chart. Gavin, she whispered. HR. He taught Vince how to get away with it. By sunrise, my anger had cooled into something sharper. Purpose. Erin stayed home. She couldn't face the office, and honestly, I didn't want her anywhere near those people until we knew who was safe. I drove to the company headquarters anyway. Not to announce myself. Not yet. Just to watch. The building was exactly what you'd expect: glass, concrete, motivational posters that lied. People moving quickly with coffee cups and tight smiles. Nobody looked up when I walked in. I was just another man in a coat. That anonymity felt like power. I went to a small conference room on the third floor, one of the rooms my transition team had reserved under a generic audit label. Inside, Marlene was already there with a laptop, a folder, and the calm expression of someone about to perform surgery. "You look like you didn't sleep," she said. "I didn't," I replied. Marlene slid the folder toward me. "We've engaged an external investigator. Former federal employment prosecutor. Her team can be on-site within hours." I exhaled slowly. "Good." Marlene kept her tone even. "But you need to understand, if you do this wrong, you don't just lose in court. You create a workplace where the truth never surfaces again." I nodded. "So what's the right way?" Marlene tapped the folder. "You let them hang themselves with process." She'd already drafted a plan. Step 1, quietly secure communications, email logs, internal chats, through legal channels. Step 2, bring in outside counsel to supervise so nobody could claim bias. Step 3, isolate HR leadership from the investigation. I read the names listed under risk of interference. Vince Caldwell. Gavin Pierce. 2 others I didn't recognize. My stomach tightened. "How many complaints?" I asked. Marlene's eyes narrowed. "Formally? Almost none." "Because they buried them," I said. Marlene nodded. "Because victims don't report to people who protect predators." I sat back. "So we don't go through internal HR?" "Correct," Marlene said. "We go around them." The temptation to storm into Vince's office and end it right there was almost physical. But Marlene was right. A dramatic firing might feel good for an hour and cost us everything later. So we built the trap. At 9:30 a.m., Marlene sent a calendar invite, marked urgent, to Vince and Gavin, along with the interim CEO and the finance chief. Subject line: ownership transition, confidential update. Nothing makes executives show up faster than the phrase ownership transition. We didn't mention my name. We didn't mention accusations. Just a meeting, with outside counsel present. I watched the hallway through the conference room glass as people moved. At 9:42, Vince arrived. He strode like he owned the building, which, until Monday, he probably believed he still did. He wore an expensive suit and a smile that said he'd already decided he was the most important person in the room. When he saw me inside the conference room, his brows lifted. He recognized me from last night. His smile didn't drop. It sharpened. Vince entered like nothing had happened. "Caleb," he said warmly, as if we were old friends. "Didn't expect to see you here." I held his gaze without returning the smile. Gavin Pierce arrived moments later, sleek and polished, carrying a tablet like a shield. He looked at me briefly, then away, like he didn't see spouses as real people. The interim CEO, Rosa Delgado, walked in last. She looked nervous, like she'd been told there was a bomb and wasn't sure where. Marlene introduced the outside attorney and the investigator, but kept it vague. Then Marlene did something I'll never forget. She stood, opened her folder, and said, "Before we begin, Caleb Mercer is the new majority owner of this company." Silence. Vince's face went blank for half a second. Like his brain had to reset. Gavin's eyes sharpened. Rosa looked like she'd been holding her breath for weeks and finally exhaled. Vince recovered fast. He spread his hands, smiling wide again. "Well, damn," he said, laughing. "Congratulations. That's incredible." He leaned forward. "So you're the mystery buyer." I nodded once. Vince's smile flickered. "Small world," he added lightly. My jaw tightened at the understatement. Marlene continued, "This meeting is confidential. The ownership change is not yet public. We're here to discuss transition protocol and immediate priorities." Vince nodded like a good soldier. Gavin's gaze stayed fixed, calculating. We talked for 10 minutes about budgets and restructuring. Vince played cooperative. Gavin asked sharp questions about process. Rosa tried not to look like she was watching a knife fight. Then the investigator spoke. "In addition to transition matters," she said evenly, "I'm here to inform you that an external workplace conduct investigation is commencing immediately." Vince's smile froze. Gavin's expression didn't change, but his hand tightened around his tablet. The investigator continued, "All relevant communications will be preserved. Certain individuals will be placed on administrative leave effective today to prevent interference." Vince gave a quick laugh. "Okay. What exactly is this about?" The investigator looked directly at him. Sexual harassment, she said. Coercion. Retaliation threats. The word retaliation hit like a hammer. Vince's face flushed. That's ridiculous. Gavin leaned forward, voice calm. We have internal processes for these matters. The investigator didn't blink. Internal processes are part of the concern. Gavin's jaw tightened slightly. Marlene slid a single page across the table toward Vince. It was a printed screenshot of his message to Aaron. If you tell your husband, I'll make sure you never work in this industry again. Vince stared at it. I watched his pupils shift, his mouth opened slightly. He looked up at me, and for the first time, his confidence cracked. That's not, he began. The investigator raised a hand. You are not to discuss evidence in this room. You are not to contact the complainant. You are not to delete or alter any communications. Vince's voice rose. You don't even know what happened. That kiss? Last night at the gala, the investigator asked calmly. Vince froze. She continued, multiple witnesses. Video coverage. A public incident at a company event. Vince looked at Gavin like he expected help. Gavin stayed composed. We need to see the full complaint. The investigator's tone was flat. There are multiple complainants. That was the first real crack in Gavin's armor. His eyes narrowed. Multiple? Marlene spoke gently, almost kindly. Yes. Vince's face hardened. His gaze snapped back to me. This is because of last night, he said, low and furious. You're doing this because you're embarrassed. I leaned forward slightly. I'm doing this because you threatened my wife. Vince's nostrils flared. She's lying. The investigator's voice cut in, sharper now. Mr. Caldwell. You are on administrative leave, effective immediately. Security will escort you to retrieve personal items. Vince jerked back in his chair. You can't. I can, I said quietly. Vince stood so fast his chair scraped. He stared at me with a hatred that wasn't just anger, it was panic. Then he did the dumbest thing possible. He pulled out his phone. I saw it before anyone else. The frantic swipe. The movement of his thumb. Deleting. Messaging. Calling. The investigator's eyes snapped to him. Do not. Vince shoved the phone into his pocket. This is a witch hunt, he snapped. And you're going to regret it. He stepped toward me, close enough that I could smell the alcohol still on him from last night. Enjoy your little power trip, Vince hissed. Because when this blows up, your wife is going to be the one everyone blames. Then he turned and stormed out. Security followed. Gavin stayed seated, face carefully blank. But his calm had shifted. Not fear exactly, more like he was recalculating. Caleb, Gavin said, voice smooth. We should speak privately. Marlene's eyes narrowed. I held up a hand to stop her. Then I looked at Gavin. Sure, I said. Let's talk. Gavin gave a small smile, like he'd just won something. We walked into the hallway, away from the room. Gavin leaned in, lowering his voice. You're making a mistake, he said. These situations get messy. I stared at him. Gavin continued, people exaggerate. They misinterpret. And lawsuits are expensive. He paused, then added softly, for everyone. My stomach tightened. Is that a threat? Gavin smiled politely. It's advice. Then he said the sentence that told me exactly who he was. I can make this go away, Gavin murmured. If you're smart. I felt the blood rush in my ears. Because now I didn't just have a predator. I had a fixer. And fixers don't operate alone. I kept my face neutral. Then I said, let's sit down. Gavin nodded, satisfied. He didn't notice Marlene behind us, already recording notes. And he definitely didn't notice that the investigator had stepped into the hallway too, close enough to hear every word. Because Gavin was about to confess to the wrong audience. We sat in a small office with the blinds half drawn. Gavin positioned himself like he owned the chair. I let him. People like Gavin are used to controlling outcomes. If you resist too early, they become cautious. If you let them talk, they expose themselves. Gavin folded his hands. Look, he said, tone gentle, I understand the emotional side. Your wife was uncomfortable. Vince, pushes boundaries. I watched his mouth form the word boundaries like it was a cute quirk. Gavin continued, but turning this into an external investigation is nuclear. It damages the company. Your new asset. He let that sink in. Then he leaned forward slightly. There are better solutions. Like what? I asked. Gavin smiled. A quiet separation. Vince resigns. Severance package. Non-disparagement. We escort Aaron into a new role, away from him. Everyone moves on. He spoke it like a recipe. I stared at him. So the victims shut up. Gavin's smile tightened. So the company survives. I let silence stretch. Then I asked, how many times have you done this? Gavin's eyes flickered. Done what? Made it go away, I said. Gavin exhaled, as if I was being childish. It's not a crime to prevent chaos. I kept my tone calm. How many? Gavin's jaw tightened. Enough. There it was. Not denial. Admission. I leaned back slightly. And Erin? Gavin's expression smoothed. Erin is valuable. She's talented. But she's also. He stopped, then chose his words carefully, like he was selecting a knife. She's also someone who needs to understand how things work. My hands clenched under the desk. Gavin went on, voice softer. If she becomes a problem, she won't just lose this job. She'll lose the field. People talk. References matter. That's just reality. I felt something cold settle in my chest. That was the machine. Not just Vince. Not just one bad boss. A system designed to teach women that silence was the price of staying employed. I looked toward the slightly open door. The investigator stood there, expression unreadable. Marlene stood beside her. I turned back to Gavin. You realize you just described retaliation, I said. Gavin smiled like I'd called him clever. I described consequences. I nodded slowly. Okay. Gavin relaxed, thinking he'd won. Then I said, we're done here. Gavin blinked. Excuse me? I stood. You're on administrative leave effective immediately. Gavin's smile vanished. You can't do that without? The investigator stepped fully into the room. Yes, we can, she said. Gavin's face drained of color. He stood too, but his composure started to slip. This is insane. I've protected this company from liability for years. Marlene's voice was calm and lethal. That's not protection. That's obstruction. Security appeared at the doorway. Gavin looked at me like he finally understood who he was dealing with. You think you're righteous, he said through clenched teeth. You have no idea what you've just triggered. I held his gaze. Then maybe you should have thought about that before you trained predators. Gavin's mouth twitched. And then he said the thing I'll never forget. If you go through with this, he hissed, your wife's career is finished. And she won't forgive you. Security escorted him out. The door closed. The room felt suddenly too quiet. I drove home with my hands tight on the wheel, mind racing. The trap had worked, too well. Vince and Gavin were out, and the investigation was moving fast. But Erin wasn't just a victim in a case file. She was my wife. And I still hadn't faced the part that hurt the most, the secrecy between us. The way her fear had made her hide things. The way my silence about the acquisition had made her feel alone. When I got home, Erin was sitting on the couch, knees tucked up, staring at nothing. She looked up when I walked in. Her eyes were red, but steady. Well, she asked quietly. They're on leave, I said. Both of them. Erin's shoulders sagged like she'd been holding herself upright by sheer will. She covered her mouth with her hand. A silent sob escaped, then another. I sat beside her, but not touching yet, because I didn't know if I was allowed. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I swallowed. I'm sorry I didn't make it easier to tell me. Erin looked at me, startled. What? I exhaled slowly. I've been busy. Distant. Focused on the deal. And I used protecting you as an excuse not to share what was happening in my life. That wasn't fair. Erin's eyes filled again. I felt like I was drowning, she said. And I didn't want to pull you under. My throat tightened. I finally reached for her hand. She let me. We sat like that for a long time, two people trying to find ground again after an earthquake. Then Erin said something that shifted everything. There's something else, she whispered. My stomach tightened. What? Erin swallowed. I didn't just think about going to HR. She looked down. I recorded him. I blinked. Recorded who? Vince, she said. And Gavin. Not everything. But enough. My heart pounded. Why didn't you tell me? Erin's voice shook. Because I was scared. And because I wasn't sure I was strong enough to use it. She stood and walked to the bedroom, returning with her phone in both hands like it weighed 100 pounds. She opened a folder and handed it to me. Audio files. Dates. Short clips with names like parking garage and office door and HR meeting. I stared at her. Erin. She shook her head. I didn't do it to trap him, she said quickly. I did it because I needed proof I wasn't crazy. That it was real. I nodded slowly, throat tight. Marlene had said we don't do revenge. We do consequences. But Erin had done something else. She'd done survival. Over the next 3 weeks, the investigation widened like a crack spreading through glass. Women came forward, some from Erin's division, some from other floors, some from years ago. Men too, people who'd watched it happen and hated themselves for staying quiet. The external investigator compiled it into something undeniable, patterns, witnesses, communications, recordings. Vince tried to fight. He hired an aggressive attorney and claimed Aaron had pursued him. Gavin tried to frame it as miscommunication. But facts don't care about narratives. Vince was terminated for cause. No severance. No quiet exit. Gavin was terminated too, and the company reported evidence of obstruction to the appropriate authorities. There were lawsuits, of course there were. But they weren't chaos. They were accountability. The board, now my board, approved sweeping policy changes, mandatory external reporting channels, and a compliance structure that couldn't be controlled by one HR kingmaker. And the most satisfying moment didn't happen in court. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon when Aaron returned to the building, not as a scared employee, but as someone who had survived the worst version of corporate power. She didn't go back to her old desk. She walked into a conference room filled with managers, executives, and people who used to look away. And she spoke. Not with dramatic speeches. Not with movie lines. Just the truth, steady and plain. I stayed quiet because I thought silence would protect me, she said. It didn't. It protected them. The room was still. Some people cried. Some looked sick.